compatible time-sharing system. And we were programming mainly out of fascination with programming. Now, half of us were staff and the other half were students, but that was all secondary. The important thing was that programming was so fascinating. And to make it even more fun, we often gave our programs funny or mischievous names. Because then you could imagine the users being amused by the name, and that would really motivate you to finish the program. And we had a tradition, a special tradition in our community, that applied to a rather common situation back then, because in the 1970s, system-level programming usually was not portable. Any program had to be written for a particular platform. So it was quite common that you would see an interesting program and you'd want to be able to run it on your computer, but that was impossible because it was written for some other kind of computer. So all you could do was write another program. Well, that was common, but in our community, when that happened, we had a particular custom. You could give the program a name, which was a recursive acronym that said that your program is not the other one. It's a humorous way of giving credit. So, for instance, in 1976, I developed the first Emacs text editor. And after that, it was an extensible programmable text editor. And after that, there were about 30 imitations of Emacs for various other systems. And one of them was called Fine, for Fine is not Emacs. And there was Sign, for Sign is not Emacs. And Eine, for Eine is not Emacs. And Mince, for Mince is not complete Emacs. And version 2 of Eine was called Zwei, for Zwei was Eine initially. So, of course, I looked for a recursive acronym name, something is not Unix, blank INU. But nothing of that form is a word, and if it doesn't have another meaning, it's not a joke. So what could I do? I thought I could make a contraction and get rid of the I and have something's not Unix, blank NU. So being an engineer, I tried systematically every possible initial. Enu, Benu, Knu, Dnu, Enu, Fnu, GNU. But GNU is the most humor-charged word in the English language, used in countless wordplays. So of course I had to choose that. But why is that word so humor-charged? Well, according to the dictionary, the G is silent and it's pronounced new. So, anytime you want to write the word new, you can spell it GNU and you've got a joke. Perhaps not a very good joke, but there are lots of them. So, I gave the system the name GNU. But please don't follow the dictionary when you pronounce this name, because we've been working on the system for over 25 years now and using it for about 17 years now, so it's not new anymore. But it still is GNU, and it will always be GNU, no matter how many people erroneously call it Linux. But that's a very common error. How did it get started? It got started with a confusion. You see, in 1990, we had almost all of the GNU system, but one major important essential component was missing. That was the kernel, which is the program that allocates the machine's resources to all the other programs you run. So the Free Software Foundation, which by then existed, hired somebody to write a kernel for us, a kernel for the GNU system. I chose the design. I chose to use a microkernel and develop a set of modular server programs to run on top of that. And that's as far as I decided. Everything else was up to him. Unfortunately, It took many years to get this to run at all. I chose this design thinking we would get it written quickly, but it didn't work out that way. It took 6 years to get a test version, and it still doesn't work very well. So we don't generally use it. That's sort of sad, but you know, nobody's successful every time. And fortunately, we didn't have to wait for the GNU herd, because in 1991, a college student named Torvalds wrote a kernel. He chose the usual monolithic design, and he got it to basically work in less than a year. That kernel was called Linux, and initially it was not free software because its license was too restrictive. Its license in 1991 did not allow commercial distribution. And that means it's not free software, because free software means any kind of user gets the 4 freedoms in any kind of usage. If business is excluded, then it doesn't qualify as free. However, in 1992, Torvalds changed the license of Linux and released it under the GNU General Public License, which was one of many different free software licenses at the time. That was the one that I had written to use it as the license of all the programs we were writing for the GNU system. But why does a free software package have to have a license? What does it mean? Well, under today's copyright law, any program is automatically copyrighted just because it's been written down. And copyright law, by default, denies users the 4 freedoms. So how do you make a program free? The only way to do it is for the copyright holders to make a formal declaration giving the users the 4 freedoms. That formal declaration is called a free software license. That's what a free software license does. So that means there are many ways of writing a free software license. As long as it ends up giving users the 4 freedoms, it's a free software license. So theoretically, there could be infinitely many different free software licenses. Of course, I hope you won't write more of them unless you really need to, because in general, it's better if we use fewer licenses for all our programs instead of more different licenses. But the point is, being a free software license is potentially a rather broad class. The GNU General Public License is one of them. It's the one that I wrote, and it's used by around 70% of free software packages. The reason it became so widely used is because of a special feature it has. It's a copyleft license. Now, what does that mean? Every free software license has to give people freedoms 2 and 3. The freedom to redistribute exact copies and to distribute copies of your modified versions. But there's more than one way to do this. For instance, some free software licenses are so permissive that they allow you to redistribute copies and make them proprietary. So a copyleft license does not allow that. When it gives you freedoms 2 and 3, it puts on a condition. When you redistribute, you have to do it under the same license, and you have to make the source code available to the next person so that the next person gets the same 4 freedoms. So a copyleft license says you can distribute, but you must respect the freedom of the recipient of the copies you distribute. The version that you distribute must carry the same freedoms that you got. The motive for copyleft is to make sure that all the users who get the code get the freedom also.